Hey, everybody, we are now live for another Althea community call. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, we were a little behind on our schedule time as we had some technical difficulties on my side. I'm out of the office in the Miami area where we're working on some really exciting things in private 5G, dynamic resource allocation, and Althea's amazing fintech and billing platform behind the scenes making that happen. So we had actually quite a exciting road trip. I'm happy to share a little bit more as we get into the conversation about how Althea is really changing the telecom legacy landscape, and we're seeing it happen day by day. This is why I'm here from Miami, and we had technical difficulties, and so appreciate everybody's patience. But I'm here with one of my favorite people from Citizen Web3, who is OG in the bare metal and validator space, and always enjoy, their perspective. And also here with Mario, who you may remember from the Discord community management and has been supporting Althea for many years as well. Obviously also an OG in the space. So I'm going to turn over the mic to y'all if you just want to say hi and a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into the conversation. And for folks that are joining us, feel free to ask questions, jump into the conversation, put your questions at Discord or on YouTube if you're joining over there, and happy to ask them and talk through things. All right. Hey, Citizen Web3, Mario, if you want to say hi, that'd be great.
Well, I was going to let Mario go first, but hi, everybody. Shall I do an intro first, or shall I let Mario go first? I'm not sure what's.
Go for it.
Oh, okay, so glad to be here, and I'm sorry also if I have some audio issues because I'm outside with my earphones, but I hope it's more or less okay. Let me know. Okay, thank you. So, my name is Serge, and as Deborah introduced me already, founder of Citizen Web3. We are a self-hosted bare metal validator. We are actually hosted in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's not a joke. I can even prove it if I turn over. Well, that's just the ocean there, but that's true. We are hosted on an island called Madeira, and it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So we have started our journey as a self-hosted validator about a year and a half ago, but I'm going to keep it quick with the intro. Apart from that, what we do, we build. We are currently building an explorer. It's called validatorinfo.com. It's a Web3 blockchain explorer that is focused on validators and mining pools. Essentially, we'll be focused on them. Yeah, we have also a podcast which is 5 years old, Citizen Web3. And apart from that, I guess that's it for the intro. I guess I'm going to stop there. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, I'll just keep it quick. I'm like Deborah mentioned, I work on the Discord community and help with the ecosystem for Althea. I've been supportive for a long time. You know me as Mario probably, and yeah, happy to be here. Listener to the Citizen Web3 podcast, or the Cosmos as it was called before. Yeah, so glad to have you with us today.
Well, thanks for everybody for being here. The conversation, we're going to kind of keep casual and really kind of riff on a bit of these underlying ideas of decentralization, which it's kind of interesting, right? The ecosystem is evolving and changing, and some things are becoming more cemented in. Obviously, there's a lot of changes in the American administration, but in many ways, there's a lack of kind of the fundamentals also being kind of first and foremost, right? Blockchains are decentralized, multi-stakeholders entities that really don't hear much about that kind of core ethos. So we want to always, even for one of our, core tenets, Althea is really built on this idea that the reason why legacy telecom and utilities are broken is because they are not resilient, they're not sovereign, and those are the kind of core components of a blockchain ethos. If you remove them, you don't have a blockchain and you don't have Althea. So I wanted to really kind of, delve into that, what that means from a practical sense in this call. And, I'll kick that over to you, Serge, here in a minute. But before we get into that, I did want to give a quick announcement on a couple of different things. The first would be our testnet that is kicking off on April 15th. And so if you are wanting to sign up, you want to participate in the testnet, we'd love to have you. It's really open to anyone. It's you don't need a certain amount of technical expertise. It's really open to everyone to really kick the tires, make sure Althea is ready for prime time with our IFI or infrastructure finance deck. So please do sign up. The cutoff date is April 15th, which tax day here in the US is coming up. So do your taxes and sign up for the IFI decks, or, whatever you feel about taxes, I guess. Yeah, so please do join us. It's going to be fun. We have a brand new front end. There's a lot of content and documentation about a really special thing that we call liquidity fusion that's been purposely built for telecoms, utilities, and infrastructure to use, which combines your normal liquidity, concentrated liquidity, and knockout liquidity all into one pool. So if you want to see how that works in real life, you want to test that out, please do join us for this testnet. You'll be the first people in the world to see this liquidity fusion in action. And I think, really seeing it in action, playing with it, allows you to really conceptualize exactly why this was built for the utility segment, right? For energy eventually mostly used in telecom right now, that needs that stable swapping pools, needs the swapping pools for the Althea token for gas, things like that. And how it really just is an amazing thing that the dev team there has put together. Justin Kilpatrick and Christian on the gravities, on the Althea dev side. So, and then Mario, where can they find the link for that? In Twitter, right? And also in Discord, we have those links around.
On Discord, Twitter, there in the announcements, there's a sign-up form. You guys can, put your stuff in, and then once we go live, we add you to a channel on our Discord with all the other participants, and that's where the fun happens.
Exactly. Okay, very cool. So that announcement, and then also we just concluded the scoring rubric the foundation did for interacting with the validator set. So those folks who have applied, they can look for the results here very soon. And then we'll be opening up another validator foundation delegation program application here soon too. So this is actually really timely as we talk about what does a good validator mean? What does it mean to run and operate decentralized infrastructure? So maybe that's a great question to kind of kick that over to you, Serge. What does that mean to you?
You could start with how are you?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
That's okay. Everything in my eyes is telecom and blockchain. So
I'm joking. It's a great question, and I think it's a question that could be tackled from so many directions, and from a technical perspective, from a social perspective, from a public perspective, from a financial perspective, from a business side. And what do you want me to focus on? Do you have something more in mind?
I think. There's a lot of different ways of perspectives, but ultimately, I think it would be interesting to talk about how you balance, running decentralized architecture in a sustainable way, right? The business aspects and how that, because, I think that's really the timely question, right? Is how that becomes sustainable.
Oh, that's a great question. I think there is obviously the short answer. And the short answer is not always sustainable. And a lot of times it's not just resources and time, more resource and time consuming that I have or the team has to spare, but it's also financially a lot of the times can be more constraining. On the other hand, like I said in the intro, we started the journey about a year and a half ago. and we slowly build up. I mean, not as a validator, as a bare metal self-hosted validator, and we slowly build up first the infrastructure, and that was a big investment. And though by like if we're talking numbers, real numbers, if you have at least one validator with, I guess, a top tier network, I'm not going to define a top tier network, everybody can define it for themselves, I guess. Then usually within 6 or 7 months, you could, it's more or less, no, more like 9 to 10 months, sorry. Again, depends what kind of equipment you're using. For example, we use industrial grade. Sorry, go on, Deborah.
Oh, I was just going to ask about that too. One thing that's kind of interesting about validator sustainability is it's often token inflation. So one thing we might want to riff on a bit after this is talk about, using inflation mechanisms versus other types of, revenue from yield, or like in Althea's case from telecom, cash flows and things like that. So yeah, I want to kind of dig into that a bit more, but please go ahead and let's kind of come back to that.
No, that's perfect. That's actually perfect that you're guiding as well, because otherwise I would go on the side. So, I guess that my long point, which I'm going to shorten and get to what you're saying, was that seeing that it does take a while. So as a business, what we realized, for example, when we planned, to become a self-hosted validator, and when we planned to build our tools, before I get to the part you asked, what I'm going to say is that one of the biggest mistakes that we did in terms of that was we underestimated how long it takes for a validator to turn product into actual revenue. In terms of the tokens they get, and in terms of the inflationary tokens they get, because while you're building a relationship with the network, while you're testing the network, while the network gets out, while it gets to trade, it takes a while. So what we realized is that, of course, having our own infrastructure, we could do other things. So, for example, one thing is obviously renting out, which we don't actually do. We have been approached by, after having some reputation, I guess, building up some reputation, we have been approached by other validators, asking us, hey, do you want to actually rent out space and host space, other people's nodes? At this point, we're not ready to, due to security and other reasons, which we decide we want to build on further. But maybe in the future. Also, for example, we're building our own explorer. So and we use a lot of data, and we parse a lot of data, and we index a lot of data in a way that we want to see. And we want to get to the end user a bit differently from how the public APIs available show it now. So in our case, having self-hosted validators, kind of, having our own nodes and our own archive nodes, deletes that necessity. So we don't have cost. We basically have zero cost towards read and write calls to the blockchain itself. So I guess that's one way. Also, in terms of sustainability, I guess we could talk also about energy, but that's a whole different conversation, which would take, I guess, too long. So I'm gonna, I think, make a pause there and see if that's the right direction I'm going at or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think these things are all kind of interesting too, because there's sort of an interesting reverse feedback loop that happens with high inflation tokens, especially, and we both work a lot in the Cosmos SDK, delegated proof of stake ecosystem, and just curious if you're seeing in general, that shift, or at least some of the blockchains really going toward how are we getting sustainable. I mean, this is kind of this RWA movement. I think that's really, Althea's always been here. But thinking about what's that sustainable cash flow that's in stables, that's in yield, whether that's treasury notes or like Althea's a little bit higher performing, quite a bit higher performing telecom networks. But yeah, I'm just curious if we're seeing that. It feels like we're seeing at least, if not a shift, it's really a disaggregation toward, like, you have kind of the more like meme where you're really getting that culture type of movement on one side, and then the rest of the blockchains are very shifted toward yield, RWAs, and that kind of thing. That's at least what I'm seeing happening, but I'm curious your thoughts as well from the operator's perspective.
I would say that's quite a big issue for operators, where blockchains are mostly really do use only inflationary tokens. And of course, validators having sometimes to also take, I'm going to start from far away, but I will get to your point. And, I do that sometimes, but and in a lot of forums, you can actually go on a lot of governance forums, and you can see a lot of users, especially with bigger blockchains like Cosmos Hub, saying, hey, validators are eating all the inflation and they're just selling their tokens. We need something else. And maybe Jaya was right with reducing Photon or whatever, or anything, whatever. So there is a lot of like movement from, I guess, the financial pressure that blockchains are getting now towards doing something else rather than just, having inflationary tokens inside of a blockchain. So that's one side of it. Of course, there is all the side that from what RWAs, as you call them, or I would even say, you refer to it as, I forgot how, but you don't say decentralized infrastructure. You have another word. You say something else. You have with Althea, I saw you guys call it. I forgot. You guys named it somehow else.
So so essentially we sort of break down this word of decentralization into kind of two key tenets, which is sovereignty and resiliency, because we really want to impart, when we're thinking about the core fundamentals and the core architecture of Althea, that idea of agency. So that's with sovereignty, not only are the operators participating in running the network, they have agency in the the governance. They have choice in what happens on the chain, and I think that's a key pillar to decentralization that gets kind of fluffed away. And this is also why. And then the other pillar is this resiliency, and this really comes down to the ownership piece of it. Right? When you're owning a piece of bare metal, you have real sovereignty, you have real choice. It's really resilient. Like I said, you're in the middle of the Atlantic. You've distributed, validator set that are both sovereign and resilient because they have, maybe they're multi-homed, maybe they're in a, bare metal, versus where you're essentially just kind of like leasing something from an AWS or, an OVH or Hessner or something, right? That where you have less of those core pillars. So we really like to, kind of get under the hood of that word decentralization and really, nail home those two important pillars, which is sovereignty and resiliency. And that's, of course, important whether you're operating a validator that's, doing consensus and so forth on a blockchain, or you're running an Althea exit, which decrypts the traffic, or you're running, a relay or whatever else. So the way that we think about the entire architecture of the internet is this way: sovereignty, where you own, you have leverage, and you have choice and agency to create the kinds of change. So that's what's I was always so exciting about blockchain, and it's important, and it's great to see it work in Althea as well.
I guess a big thing comes to mind, when you asked about, you mentioned decentralization, owning a piece of the network, and so on and so forth, and sustainability and operator side. And I can tell you that, Althea is in terms of what is the point of Althea, right? It is the decentralized infrastructure. And that's why, one of the reasons why we had such a big connect. But I can definitely tell you that as an operator, even running such thing as, decentralized archive nodes, which not many archive nodes at all, people run at all. Not many networks are interested in that. In terms of operators, I can tell you that, yeah, they say they are, but when you actually, as an operator, say, hey, here we are, we are running middle of the Atlantic, our own infrastructure, we run a lot of other in front of, it does take, it's not enough. And I understand that. That's why, for example, as an operator, we have to think of other products like explorers and so on and so forth, podcasts, explorers. But I think it's good because I think it gives a network diversity in terms of what operators do, not just providing simply infrastructure. It's basically creating a market where people have to compete. And I think that's the game, and it should be like that. But yeah, it is a big problem, and it would be cool to see more networks are actually not just writing in their white papers, hey, we are about decentralizing, geographically, we are about having operators outside of AWS, but actually, I don't think we should be more rewarded for what we do than other validators. But I do think networks should pay more attention to operators who are not hosted in data centers. And it would, I guess, make life easier for a lot of smaller operators who are hosted like that, because we're not the only ones, of course.
Yeah, and I would love to see a world where, the operators of a variety of different type of infrastructure stack together. I mean, we think we've been talking about this, in like the DPIN world for a long time, but the idea that you could run telecom infrastructure, energy infrastructure, operating infrastructure, kind of all in one rack, I think has been kind of exciting for a while. I think unfortunately, some of the mechanics around DPIN kind of created a lot of more Sybil type of incentives, right, to run something that wasn't necessarily practical. So I think I'm excited to see if maybe we can't start achieving that more as we get to projects more like Althea that are more focused on that revenue. I mean, sometimes the benefit of a bear market is that you really do get down to the fundamentals of a buyer and seller, right, and creating value and paying for that. So but yeah, I think, that's actually really interesting, Serge, because I think what you're saying here is like you're creating that value, and that the kind of very fundamental human properties, right, of competition and having value and someone sort of paying or for that value being created, whether it's just sort of these other features or it's for that resiliency. I would say that one of the challenges is that people don't pay for privacy. People don't pay a premium for resiliency. And so it's very hard, I think, unless a project or a larger, sometimes you see these even at the foundation level, like the Linux Foundation, for example, really pushing these things. Because at the individual level, individuals often just choose based on, really basic, what's in it for me, what's the like upfront value. As in some of these longer ROIs like resiliency and security and those sorts of things, people don't pay a premium for. So that's the challenge, right?
I think that's one definitely of the biggest challenges, and you're absolutely right. The networks that notice us is definitely privacy networks, and TP networks are exactly what you're describing. And I think one other challenge that should be, in my opinion, it's worth noting, that I hope gets sorted with more smaller operators appearing, is that as a self-hosted operator, one of the funniest things is that the way you have to build your infrastructure is very resilient. And the resilience here has a very interesting price, because you're connecting to networks which hosted most of them in data centers. So, for example, as a self-hosted provider, we have outer contour and an inner circle of our own networks. We have two networks. One of the networks is the self-hosted network, like I say, with all of our validators and service nodes and so on and so forth. And we have an outer, so-called network, which are connected virtually. And the outer network is, of course, hosted, which is just traffic servers, of course, but it's, of course, hosted in the cloud. But we have to have them, and we have to host them. We have to be connected to them virtually, because otherwise our connection ping to the networks would be so slow that it would be not enough to run validators. And it's ironic that we have to do that. In a way, it gives us higher resilience as an operator, and I'm sure that I take interviews for 5 years with. I speak with a lot of validators, big, small, tiny, and I know that the setup we have is super over the top, for a lot of people. But we have to do it. It's not like we don't want to just do it just because we want to be decentralized, but because we want to be decentralized, we also have to build these things on the top, which is, like I said, it's an ironic kind of thing to tackle, but it does exist.
Well, right, and I don't think we want to like let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Everything is a process, and a balance of practicality and core architecture, right? I'm curious too, because one of the choices that Althea has really done on the architecture side of things is really this idea of more like batching and transaction prioritization. That allows us to not have to worry about TPS. Because what I do see oftentimes with like really high TPS chains, or sometimes you kind of see it with like I've heard, and maybe you can tell me wrong, but Solana validating and being an operator on that is very kind of latency sensitive. Networks, I say. And then so what happens when you're very latency sensitive, of course, then many different validators who have, whatever architecture issues, or maybe their data center isn't as well peered, right? I mean, the internet is not monolithic as well. All these data center and IXs, I mean, it's really just talking between two computers, right? So you might have it might be less peer to this peer, this ISP, or better to this one. And there's a lot of latency variability. And then, anytime there's an issue, there's that as well. So we architected to allow for many different validators to be part of the ecosystem without any sort of penalty for latency, and basically set our performance upgrades are around batching, adding layer twos, and then transaction ordering. But yeah, curious your perspective on that too, because that's kind of our perspective to scaling. Which, if anybody wants to read a little bit more, we've got a blog over there at blog.althea.net.
I think it's absolutely correct. And I think what you guys are doing is, again, you're paving way for operators outside of just simply data centers. Because right now, you mentioned Solana. For example, if somebody wants to run a Solana outside of home, you need a 10 gigabit line. And, that's not available anywhere. That's one. Then you will want a failover, right? Now, okay, where do you get a failover? Usually you get a Starlink. Now, Starlink maximum has 235 megabytes in Europe. So it will not run Evmos, let alone Solana. So, you have to, it's impossible. So what you guys are doing is basically, in my opinion, is very correct. You're paving the way and you're saying, hey, we can scale in different ways. We don't need, to have 20,000 transactions per second. We don't need to put so much rubbish in a disk space, right? I mean, and transactions per second is a very arguable, scalability metric in general, right? I mean, of course it is, but anyways. I think that what networks are understanding slowly is that modularity in a lot of things is the way to go, and it was always the way to go, obviously. But it took, of course, us 15 years or so to get back to where we kind of started with the ideas, and maybe it's for the best. Maybe it has to go through all these processes. You mentioned at the beginning, like your question, and you also mentioned in your thing, how do people understand whether validators are good? And I wanted to slowly, like, if you will, I kind of was thinking about this and during the last 20 minutes of the conversation, and I wanted to actually answer that if it's okay, if it's possible, because I do have a nice answer for that.
Yeah, I think that's the proverbial. What makes a validator good? That's I'd love to hear your perspective.
So I'm gonna do it the cheeky way, and I'm sorry, but it's going to be a bit of a small advertisement. So, like I said, we're building a tool called validator.com, and one of our goals is to allow people to compare validators. Because today, when we talk about validators, people don't differentiate between validator as a node and validator as a business. Unfortunately, most explorers will show you information about what's called validator as a node. Very rarely. So today, explorers are slowly learning to work with what is validator as an entity. It's very far away from the truth. And, we think that working so much with infrastructure, working so much with validators, we decided that we want to answer this in a sort of verifiable automatic way. And that's why we want to build a tool. And that's why we're basically building it. And that's why we basically want to help not just people, but also foundations, also networks, when they come in and try to understand, usually every network, whenever they try to build their validator set, they have some kind of forms to fill up. And of course, they have to go through, they have to believe people, they have to trust that what the validators are saying is true. Unfortunately, in some cases, it's probably that it's not, I can imagine. In some cases, it doesn't turn out to be true because the validator might not be able to put in the work. Sometimes I just want to get the delegation in the line. So we were trying to kind of, build automatization and verifiability around it and delete that necessity, not just for foundations, of course, but also for people. And also with that, what came along, and I'm going to get back to your question previously, though, that's why it also popped into mind. With it, what came along, what we realized is that when you are sort of trying to evaluate validators, you first have to evaluate a network. And this is where this is what started me thinking about it when you were talking about TPS and everything, because I remember that, we realized, okay, in order to evaluate a validator as an entity, we have to evaluate validators as a node, which means we first to evaluate the network and how it functions. And that's where we started to gather a lot of those types of metrics like TPS and everything else. And also this is what we're trying to do. But what we understood is that, today it's very hard for the average user. I'm sorry to say that, but I consider myself an average user. To compare things, I want to compare, like, let's say, a proof of work to a proof of stake network, whether it's from the perspective of revenue or whether it's from the perspective of, let's say, I don't know, the health rate of the validators or the operators, not necessarily validators, but I mean, miners or mining pools and validators are essentially the same thing. We don't really talk about it in the industry, but they have exactly the same on-chain metrics. The only difference is one has direct delegators and one has miners that come together in a mining pool. Otherwise, they have exactly the same metrics. And when we realized that also people don't have tools today to compare and talk about sustainability, to comparing smaller validators, to understanding that smaller validators can be as beneficial in terms of revenue and in terms of security and in terms of the job they do in generally, compares to larger operators. And this is something we want to do with the tool, and we hope that will help not just validators, not just networks, but primarily, the end users that are looking to evaluate the health of a validator and the health of a network that they validate in.
I really love that. That resonated a lot with, a lot of the challenges that we've had, being support for many of these blockchains that are, of course, on Althea. But yeah, there is, to me, it strikes me there's so much information asymmetry for users in blockchain, especially since it's highly technical. And not much of those things are visible, right? All of those metrics that we could use and math that we could use to evaluate objectively the different entities. And so what you see happen then is it becomes sort of an insider clubs, right? The foundations work directly, and then there's a lot of lobbying that happens behind the scenes. The bigger validators lobby for foundation delegations. And so a lot of that sort of insider business starts to take place. And then, of course, then becomes less resilient and decentralized because it's more of a social endeavor than it is one of a structural, sovereign and resilient type of foundation. So I'm actually very excited, to see what y'all are building on that front. Now, is that displayed, typically as a dashboard? Is it like a bit of a plugin for each network, or how are you sharing this information with users? This is great.
A good question. So we are still, of course, working on that. And what we realized, it's funny. When we started to build the tool, the main page contains validator metrics, and like I said, we realized that first we have to evaluate the network. So we realized that the main page that we want to show users is actually going to be the last thing that's actually going to be functional on the website, because we have to build all the logic and the backend first. So basically what we came to right now is we're trying to keep the UI quite simple, a bit gamified. We want to stick with making explorers an adoption tool. So basically, for example, if we're talking about network profiles, when a person goes on a network profile, they have like a small thermometer, which basically says the higher temperature. You cannot get 100 or 0. Well, you technically can, but that would be impossible. A network would have to, really, I don't know what you'd have to do to do that, because we don't evaluate networks that are not running at all completely. So I don't think any network could get, we evaluate in decentralization, scalability, and security. In each one of those, you also see like 3 meters. So of course you can click it and see what's under it. You can actually see all the calculations. But our idea is that we want to work with the adoption, and I believe that explorers are a point of adoption, just like wallets are. Wallets have evolved over the last 15 years from what Electron to today you can use a wallet to transfer any token to anywhere in seconds, pretty much. Okay, what's underneath is questionable, but still, it did evolve to that. You have all types of passwords, social passwords, I don't know, paper passwords, whatever. Explorers, unfortunately, are kind of stuck in the past, and my opinion is because they're trying to be too technical. You can be technical and you can still appeal to a regular user, because anybody who uses the blockchain, doesn't matter if it's centralized, decentralized, is going to have to use the Explorer. So if they don't understand what they're looking at, if they cannot evaluate their own wallet, their own account, let alone blockchain health metrics, then I don't think they're going to be that much interested to use it. So we wanted to show both the analytical side, but try to keep the UI, like I said. Okay, you want to evaluate the chain, look at the thermometer. The temperature is higher, it means the network is healthy. You want to understand what's underneath, click it, read all of it, do your own research. So yeah, basically the same goes for validators. We show very simple metrics, but if you click on it, it does go quite deep. And of course, chain health is the most complicated thing we had to build, because it takes into account roughly it takes on-chain, off-chain, and mixed metrics, and it's about 30 different types of metrics that we're still not evaluating everything. For now, we concentrated on the on-chain metrics. That's the largest part. But yeah, I'm going to put a stop there. Otherwise, I will go on too much about it.
Yeah, then it's interesting too, because it kind of becomes then what metrics are important and why those are chosen. And, it's kind of, because the start of the conversation, there's so many ways that you can kind of think about it, right? And then there's and then you decide, is it a user education process? Or do we say, like, we want to make things more simple and make it more accessible for more people? I think is the challenge. But I mean, it's great to start anywhere, right? I mean, we have this idea of the Nakamoto coefficient that's been around a long time, but that isn't really displayed anymore. I mean, the other challenge is, of course, then, blockchains are going to display this if they are, meeting some of those metrics, but maybe they aren't if they're not. So maybe this becomes something where people will look around for, oh, hey, this has a report card, essentially, right? And those that hide their report card are maybe trying to not have that be as visible. And maybe for them it's not as important. I mean, there's definitely many. I think there's many chains that have made the assumption that some small amount of decentralization is okay, or it's okay to essentially run a corporate chain, right? The main problem with saying, okay, I'm a corporate chain, though, is that that's not transparent to users where they're putting their risk, where they're putting their trust. And so I think these sorts of metrics exposure, we can start to hopefully build to that, as a user, where should you look to? Where's the risk? And I think sometimes it's just really hard to find. So I think that sort of created a weird feedback loop, because then users demand that the centralized corporation answers and be liable, because they have to find a place to put their trust in, instead of they can't put their trust in the programmatic elements of it at this moment. So I think this exposure and this transparency is really key for our industry to start to think about how we want to create metrics and KPIs and industry standards. So really, really glad to see it. And of course, we're very supportive on the Althea side.
I think that first of all, users, in my opinion, from the terms of UI, they should have a choice. So first of all, if I'm a user, I want to have a choice whether I want to see complicated metrics or whether I want to see something simple. Two, I think that as a user, I want whatever I'm seeing to appeal to me, to appeal to the and I mean culturally. And I mean, if the industry, likes pixelated art, then maybe adoption should happen through pixelated art, right? So, why not? And talking about sustainability and what types of metrics, that was a big question. And at the beginning, I said, when you asked about what makes a good validator, that you can look at it from many perspectives. And the reason I guess that's in my head is because when we started to evaluate networks, what we're trying to do is to evaluate it from every single perspective. Of course, that's impossible, but we're trying to gather what we can. And once again, that goes back to, what other revenue validators have. So here is something as a bonus for us as a self-hosted validator. We're building a very complex tool, which otherwise we would have to go and pay for the data. As a self-hosted validator, we don't. So we have those networks. We already have those nodes. We can evaluate them by ourselves and show the end user whatever data, as long as we can, of course, have the resource to index and scrape it and to whatever, turn the backend to UI. Of course, that also takes resources. But anyways, long story short, I think that users should try to not try, sorry, but we've been taught a lot in blockchain, in my opinion, only to look at technical metrics. And I'm not sure that that's the correct way to evaluate especially bigger blockchains, because they're communities, not just a collection of technical endpoints.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point as well too. So I mean, how do they? But what sort of ideas would? I mean, of course, it's just in like choosing any kind of product, right? Like you might choose an organic product because you care about sustainability in the earth, right? And you might buy your eggs that are farmed in that way. So yeah, and I think it is a mix of practicality and ethos. I mean, like, certainly for us, we've been building for such a long time. We deliberately chose to make sure that that we were focusing on those ethos and so forth, and building in a way that was practical, and building that revenue, building together with users, which has been kind of an interesting journey, right? We've definitely developed a lot and changed, like, very early on in 2017, 2018, we tried a lot of the things that like Helium did, for example, right, where you sort of incentivize people, and then realized, of course, the physical infrastructure needs more management. And so I do think there is probably something to said, for looking at how a project evolves, to where, where they're going to be conservative, and if that aligns with your perspective as well.
I think it does. I think I prefer seeing projects stick to their ethos and take longer to develop. Whether I don't want to name projects, I'm not going to, but we've all seen big hypes coming. Gather 2 million followers or 1 million followers on Twitter, do big, community campaigns or ambassador campaigns or whatever. And then kind of, after 5 years, they still didn't build anything, so, and they gather a lot of money. That's the interesting thing. So of course they get the hype. So in my opinions, I think I prefer, in terms of ethos, again, ourselves, we took a long time to get to where we are, it took us years and years to understand what we want to do and how we want to do it. But I'm proud to say, just like I think you guys are, that we stuck to our ethos and did it, and doing it like Frank Sinatra said, my way, right? So, but seriously, I really believe that that's important. I believe that, like on the podcast, talking about ethos, and I bring quite often lately, not just founders to the podcast, but writers, people who talk about such ideas as anarchism, libertarianism, privacy enthusiasts. And sometimes they ask me, why do you bring me? And I say, well, because if we are building an alternative industry, it doesn't matter what alternative, but if we're building it exactly the same how it was before, without any ethos, then why are we here? There's no reason for me to be here. There's no reason for anybody to be here, because we are then wasting our time. So unless the people who are building this industry are at least hearing those ideas and hearing those alternatives, okay, they might not connect with them, but they have to hear them. They have to understand that it exists in order to at least want to work for it, or desire that. So for me, that's ethos are always, they win. I guess that's not the right way to build a business, and you learn sometimes the hard way. But I can definitely say, after many years of doing it, but there are ways to combine ethos and business, and not necessarily just go one way or another.
Well, I think they have to be, because I think you hit the nail on the head. If we're really going to disrupt, if we say, look, there are problems with how legacy industries are being developed, there's the power asymmetry, whatever, there's issues with things, and we need them to make change, then those things do really have, you can't always do what you've always done. You get the same outcome, right? So I 100% agree that it is when we're thinking about recreating the world the way we want to see it, right? Then that is absolutely part of it. We have to think creatively, get that amazing diversity of thought, and it's been an exciting, like you said, last 10 years or 15 years almost now of blockchain, being a thing since the Satoshi's white paper, and definitely some heartaches along the way, but it is amazing to hear and see how so many people came together to create this vision, and really bring all that diversity of thought. One thing I wanted to, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I wanted cryptocurrency had a question about integrating with Ethos, Degen Phone, and Pine Phone, which I think is great. And I wanted to just kind of link that in because you were just talking about ecosystem, right? And kind of like diversity of like the ethos system. Can we make that a word? Ethos and system, ethos system. But, you know, I think absolutely one of the cool things that's going to be, you know, coming down the pipeline, you'll see with Althea is more and more cellular support. So Althea 5G, and that's when we've been doing a lot of testing around that, and roaming support, and really exciting development. So yeah, appreciate if you all stay with us, and we also are opening up the pre-sales for the Czar kits here very soon as well too. We've been working on that. The Czar is the Zombie Apocalypse Readiness Kit. It is basically Althea 5G in a box. So you can connect your phones and devices and things that are SIM-based in the network at home. And so you'll have sovereignty and resiliency of the stack. You're not going to make a lot of money. It's not for that. It's for basically building resiliency in your community using these, you know, tools. But yes, and you also asked cryptocurrency if we have a Discord or Telegram group. We are primarily Discord and have a really great community there. So I'm not sure where we can link, if we can link on YouTube or not, but we'll please do take a look. I believe the link is in our Twitter profile. And just to kind of wrap things up, where should we learn more about what Citizen Web3 is doing?
Oh, that's a great question. I always forget to do those things. So thank you for asking that. So the tool I was talking about, it's still, of course, in beta and alpha, but it's already live. We release as we build. It's all open source. You can either, of course, visit our GitHub, but it's complicated. So validaterinfo.com, that is the tool I'm talking about. Not validator.info, which are our friends. It's a different tool. I'm going to give them a free advertisement. There we go. It's validaterinfo.com. And citizenweb3.com is our main website. And from there, you can find the links to everything we do. But yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a coming up soon. We'll have Mario, maybe you can share with us upcoming community calls. And I know we're going to be doing an event around the testnet. So please do sign up now so that you all can be a part of that. And then, you know, Mario, do you want to share any upcoming calls that they should be on the lookout for? I know we're going to be up in Seattle as well at the conference, so you can find out about that on LinkedIn, showing off some of the 5G stuff, and then another one in May in the Port of LA. So if you're interested in the more telecom side of what we do, please stay in touch with us there.
Yeah, we will have one on the 15th, the launch of the testnet with the team, where we just walk you guys through the UI and what you can do, and if you have any questions, we will be able to answer them there as well. And we will, moving forward, have calls on Fridays, as we do today with Citizen Web3. We have some other projects in the pipeline. I don't want to say too much yet because I still need to finalize exactly the days and the times. But yeah, there's going to be an exciting lineup for you guys. So definitely put your notifications on, and yeah, see you soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again, and we'll see you on the blockchain. Talk soon. Bye.
Yeah, talk soon.